All right, welcome everybody to the latest Live Motocross podcast as we talk all things SMX, MXGP, training, and just moto in general with former GP star and now trainer Brian Jorgensen. Firstly, thank you to everyone for listening and supporting the site. We really appreciate it. We'd also like to thank our sponsors in Fly Racing, Firepower, Dirt Store, and Fuchs Silkaleen for all their incredible support. As without them, none of this would be possible. All right, welcome, Brian. How's life? And thanks for joining us again, mate. Been a few months since we last spoke, but it's been a busy time for you, traveling, racing, spending time with family, work. You've sort of done a bit of everything, haven't you, mate?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in a couple of months, but when we calculate that, it's almost like 6 months.
Yeah.
So a couple of months seems like it just flies by so quickly. But yeah, it's been quite busy with celebrating my 50th birthday and going away on a cruise, going to the US and coming back and straight to work and doing what I normally do, like do my training schools and been to Iceland this year twice, doing an incredible event, what called Route 1. So we travel around from Reykjavik to you can say the south of Iceland, and we go to the north and we go to the east, and we travel around the coast, and we stop at 7 different tracks and we follow each other around, and stop at different venues and yeah, it's just an amazing trip, and it's great to see. Iceland obviously doesn't have a lot of culture of racing because it's such a short season, but really over the last couple of years, I've been going up there since 2019. I was not up there last year because I was too busy, but seeing the developing of the rider as well, and they get more and more coaching on the backside of obviously me coming up and trying to making some routines for how to train and what to train, and you can really see how the Icelandic riders are also developing nationally. So hopefully we will see in a couple of years some Iceland people also going to to race here in Europe. But otherwise just been busy with doing training school with Yamaha as well, Yamaha Scandinavia, and we're doing in Sweden and Norway, and had the pleasure to go to the Super Finale in Sweden, which was a great event. First of all, because it's the program that Yamaha have for the young riders. In 65, 85 is every year. It's just it's just a giving such a giving opportunity for me also to be a part of, to see all those great young athletes and having the best time of their life, and this time we had like a riding day on Wednesday where everyone turned up, almost like over we were over 100 riders and 120 doing the MXGP of Uddevalla. So really fun seeing so many positive young riders and parents just thinking that is the greatest thing they've ever been to in their whole life, and everyone is happy. We had some Japanese over helping them to to get all the bikes prepped for the weekend, and yeah, it's just a really loving and giving event that I really appreciate to be a part of.
That's awesome, mate. There's obviously so many really cool, things that you're doing with Yamaha, and obviously the state of the sport in those junior levels is pretty strong. Talking to BT, Ben Townley, quite a lot on a couple of podcasts, and obviously his sons are racing, and they're sort of part of that framework now. It's really cool to see, how it all looks, and just the level in Europe is something special, isn't it, mate? Like talking about all those French kids, they're absolutely insane. The Scandinavian youngsters,
Yeah,
they're coming through. Those Estonians, Latvians, they're super fast, and then the Spanish,
yeah.
Italian, they're always up there. British has always got some good riders, even though they'd like to be producing more. But yeah, it's pretty impressive what you do, mate. And you'd see it firsthand, these talents coming through the ranks until they sort of reach the pro level. It's very competitive for spots, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny, like obviously I raced Ben back in 2005 in the MXTP class, and then he went to the US, and so we didn't get to race a lot against each other, but we had some good race together, Castellón de Lago, where we were fighting for the win, and then seeing them 20 years later with their kids, Levi and Jagger. And this year it was Joshua Coppens, which I did many nice races with, and have great respect for, and seeing his son Nixon coming through the Blue Crew program from 65 and joining the master class and the super finale, and seeing his developing every year. So once you raise them, and now I get to see them and hopefully help in some ways their kids to become better, and I'm sure that Ben and Joshua also have so much knowledge, but it's great to be a little part of it, and let's say by that, and see them grow and develop.
Yeah, it's really cool to see, mate. And obviously, you look back, and I guess it's really cool to see someone you know well, like Mikael Harrop, doing so well in America in pro motocross, throwing it in their top fives more often than not, and just really holding his own, which is no mean feat. It's a lot different to the European scene, but he adapted so well to the tracks, the 1 day format, the heat, which is another thing that needs to be taken into account. But those tracks are generally probably more fun than some of the European ones. But yeah, still nonetheless, really cool to see him doing that on a Triumph. Took the opportunity and's made the most of it, hasn't he?
Yeah, but that's a little bit of what we have talked about on previous programs. A little bit of a shame sometimes with the age limit. I feel that Mikkel, especially if I have to take him into consideration here, that he was sort of coming through like quite a few years and had a couple of injuries. Had to wait for next season, and suddenly when you are there, you get maybe your opportunity for riding for a good team, where you have a good group of people that you can really develop with. Then it's like this, and then it's over. Then you're like standing there, being 23 years old, thinking I'm just about to make it in this class. Now I find a groove and find my position and what to do better for next season, and then it's over. And for me, that's a bit sad. Obviously, to my own perspective of my own career, I didn't start racing World Championship until I was about 20. So, and it took me, let's say, 4 or 5 years before I really understood and felt it on my body what I needed to do regarding training. And obviously also, as we have spoke about in previous programs as well, like, at that time, there was no information about how to train. And so it was like, you had to kind of live through it and feel your body and listen to a little bit of what people are saying, even if there was not a lot of information out there, funny enough. And that took a lot of years. But I felt like with Mikkel especially, that he was just coming to that point where he started believing that he could win races in MX2 class. He also, showed that he could win. Now it was about, bringing the consistency and understand everything about recuperation and like everyone we had to learn when we on that level in the World Championship. So it's a bit of a shame, but I was glad to see that he got an opportunity in the US and ride there and done extremely well. I think it took him a couple of rounds to get into it, but it's only normal. Same with American coming over to the European tracks. It's not easy. It takes definitely a while to get used to everything.
Yeah, mate, it's really cool to see what he's doing, and we look forward to seeing more interesting options for his future. He's opened up there, so you never know what 2026 will look like, mate. But yeah, we look forward to seeing it. And obviously, we've got to talk about that Swedish GP. Obviously, you were there, mate. How good was gifting, putting on a show for the fans, mate? It was thrills and spills, and yeah, it was really cool. Even though the crashes sort of tarnished it a little bit, they can never take away those memories, and just the atmosphere and the environment must have been so good there, mate. Obviously, being there must have been incredible. The crowd was losing it. He had some big incidents all weekend. There was one with Geyser, and obviously there was a big crash for Seawer on a separate one, but yeah, there was some big spills that weekend. But very cool to see a home hero like gifting showing such speed and fight and tenacity, mate. Not often you get to have that at your home GP, and yeah, that was one of those special moments in motocross that will live with him forever. It's obviously pretty awesome for you to see it too as a fan.
Yeah, like I lived through some great moments, racing in Uddevalla, and like I said, it was my home Grand Prix, and I had pretty much the Swedish and the Danish fans there. So to live through that experience myself and knowing what it takes, to ride in front of that many people that really comes that one time a year, and you want to put on the show first of all for yourself, but also for the people that took their time and spend their money to come and see you. You want to produce, you want to make good results, and he certainly, put on a show. Which it was the first time I can honestly say that I was actually sitting on top of the mountain, the big rock mountain that looks over the start and pretty much the whole track. And when I was finished with the Blue Crew program, which we finished on Sunday morning, I said goodbye to everyone, and then I just sat up there and thinking, this is actually going to be awesome, because normally I work with some riders or doing something down in the pit, and walk in the center of the track. But here you're walking around, you see one corner and another corner, but here you actually get the overview. And I was very, very, how can you say, excited to sit down and see how this two motors are gonna be developing, because it could go either way. It could go like all in and then crash early, or it could go like it pretty much did to the end of the race. And I have it's not very often that I think that I have, like, when people ask me and said, who do you look up to the most? And I have respect for all riders, all riders that are riding in the World Championship. I know what it takes to, to get there, and you sacrifice quite a lot to get there. You're also, dealing with the opportunity, or you can say the danger of something can happen, and that's why I have a respect for everyone that lines up there, because I was one of them. And I know that it can be quite a tough, tough event, or it can be a really nice event where you feel so loose and you just like everything just works really good. But it's not very often that I actually walk away from a race, and especially the second moto with Gifting. First moto, it was just a race incident. He was riding really good and very controlled, and actually very very smart. I think he saved he wanted to save the best to the rest. It felt like that he was not trying to be hero on the first lap, but he made some really good progress. And then him and Geiser just came together, and it was just a pure race incident. Like Geiser, he jumped completely, and when he landed, he turned into to close the door, and maybe didn't realize that the Gifting was actually still in there trying to choose where he's going to land. And that was on Geiser. So I was just glad to see that both riders got away with it, because that was pretty big. So and of course, the second moto was just, everyone was just fired up. Normally at a MXGP, when you have a long day like that, with so many races, you see people, maybe a couple laps in, they start walking away, because we already know who's gonna win, and let's avoid the traffic. There was 26,500 people there, so it was really nice. But everyone was just hanging around. There was nobody that was leaving any seats anywhere. And I was just basically on the edge of my nails, like just watching him, like thinking, fuck, I could feel his, heart rate, because, riding in front of your fans, you just want it, obviously, when you're a GP rider, you want it every weekend, and you want to produce just, for yourself, because that's the only reward we get for all the hard work that we put in during the day, and the psychological games, and, all the stuff that comes with it. But obviously, when it's your only and one GP of the year, and so many people are fired up, and the way that he did it, you want to give a little bit extra, and I would certainly say he did. He surprised, I think, more or less everyone, but also surprised himself, with passing Hurlings and the way that he did it. And that part of the track, actually, after the start, where you go down and then you have a double up, and then you went outside, he went outside, and then you drop down, and then you go into a split lane, and he was unbelievable fast there. Like, he catch from the finish line to that first big tabletop, I think he catch like 3 seconds. It was unreal. And he did that on Hurlings, and then he waited around like one lap, and then the next lap he started attacking, February, and I believe there was only, when he passed Hurlings, was 3 laps to go, and when he went after February was on the last lap, and he did exactly the same thing. And you were thinking, like, when I was standing there in qualifying race on Saturday, February had the same line, and he was just so consistent and so fast down through that, and you think there's no way you can go faster. And then Gifting just find that inside where he was just like jumping over the braking bumps, and it was just amazing, and everyone was just off the floor, honestly. Like, it was incredible. When he passed him, everyone went mental, and then he basically just had to come down and up and down and up and then left, and then he would basically be on what I would call more of a simple part of the track, and then he thrown it away there. I was honestly, it was like I was so devastated. I could feel the pain, from him, or that I would just stand up and I was just screaming no, and I was like looking around like, oh, did anyone see that, because I really felt so disappointed on his behalf that, all that work, it was incredible. It still is incredible because, for me, he brought it home. It was just a small little mistake where the front wheel went, and that's it. But I think he was on his, edge of everything, but still in control when he was riding, actually. But I think once he passed there, maybe he couldn't really believe it himself, and he just a split second of thinking, yes, I'm gonna win, and that's where it all disappears, And I spoke to him. I wrote him a long message after the race, and I said, fuck, I'm sorry, man. This was incredible what you did, and keep it up. And I know it's gonna be a big pill to swallow for sure, and that will take more than a couple of days. What should have been and what would have been, kind of situation, because I know what it feels like, when you're that close to win. And I could just imagine myself, like with Teutzenthal, just imagine crashing, like, you're doing your life race, and then you crash before the finish line. It would, I don't know if, I know it's easier said than done, but I don't know if I would have forgiven myself. It's so difficult on that level of racing, that once you get there, of course, he was just going with the flow and just giving everything he had, and you would have really, wished that anything in the world, even I think the riders that he passed would have thought, fucking fair play, you deserve that win, and that's quite difficult to get from other, champions. But because you see him fighting, and he's coming a lot better of the last half of the season, you really, it would have been a perfect scenario, winning in front of your Grand Prix. But I think that will take him a couple of GPs to get over. But I was really hoping that he could bounce back in Arnhem and show everyone that I deserve to be up here. But as I understood for him also, it was just, he said, I just cannot forget it. I cannot almost forgive myself from what happened, And I think that goes a little bit deeper, and especially when you know how much you have to train and how much you have to do to get on that position. And, it's not easier. Let's put it that way. It's not easy on a stock bike. And I think, again, it's just really proved what a private team and how good that Yamaha really is from stock. I rode the new Yamaha in Iceland when I was there, the 450, because I normally ride 125 or 250. That's all I can have power for those days. But I really absolutely loved riding that bike. It was so smooth on power. It's so easy to handle that it just feels like you're on a 250 with a lot more power, but usable power, not like what I remembered from last time I rode 450 when it was like bap, bap, it was a lot of power. So I understand that, the factory bikes are a different level, but I still think it's quite amazing. First of all, what he's able to do with that bike, and how that bike actually can produce that kind of speed around the track on pretty much being a stock bike.
Yeah, it's super impressive, mate. You hit the nail on the head there. All that effort and that putting a performance like that in with a non-factory bike, so impressive, and definitely a good advert for him, the team, Yamaha, like you said. And I guess, like well, mate, opportunities like that don't always come around, and you could definitely see why he'd be pretty upset by it. But he definitely gained a lot of fans, heaps more exposure. Sometimes in those moments, you look back at the World Cups back in the days of that Dutch team in the 70s. They never won one, but they're almost remembered more fondly in some ways. So it's not all bad. There's still so much to look forward for him, because he's probably going to get a couple of team offers, whether he stays or goes. That's sort of up for him to decide. But yeah, definitely the wider focus. And then probably you look at opportunities in America one day, the fans would love to see him there for sure. And a lot of those GP riders are making that step over to race a few rounds here and there, or do the whole series like Gio, Pacharel. It'd be cool to get your take on that. Gifting would be pretty cool for that. He's probably got more unfinished business at the GPs, because if he's running up there so impressively, he's been around the top five. Wasn't like he was just went from 15th to first. He's been around that podium level speed all season, and he's got that real fight and grit and determination, doesn't he, mate? So we look forward to seeing more of it. But while we're talking about those riders, beyond the factory teams, it'd be interesting to get your take on Gio and Pacharel. And it looks like Gio, he made SMX. He's possibly going to get a 250 Supercross deal. So it's pretty cool where these opportunities can lead you, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Just to finish off with gifting. I mean, I put a post up the day after, and I thought, and where I said, I hope that your phone are red hot today. Because I really wish that, not because I think he's doing an incredible job, and I think JK Racing is doing a really good job of handling that bike, and maybe doing the bits and pieces too that can make it a lot better, or a bit better for him anyway, because we are so individual. So it's basically about suspension. I mean, the bike have enough power. It's just a little bit where you wanted the power to deliver, and it seems like they find a good solid solution for gifting where he can feel safe with the bike, and the frame is just fantastic anyway. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see him getting on a factory bike, and or getting some more support, because it could also be a different scenario that if he gets on a factory bike, now he's kind of a we've seen that over the past anyway. He's a hero in the team, and everyone lift him up, and it gives him a lot of a bus, to perform, and everything that he makes when he score points and top 10 or top 5 is like a win. But if you sign a factory deal, then you expect it to win. Nobody's gonna be like completely over the moon, because that's what you signed for. So there is a scenario there that I'm not sure if it's gonna be a lot better. But anyway, I hope that he's gonna get some more support, and maybe in that way get some more of a small factory parts that can maybe even make the bike a little bit better for him. But regarding Geo and what they're doing in Pacharel in the US, I think that's great that they go over there and kind of have a little bit of a second wind of their career, and giving I remember Geo was almost, he was winning a world championship one year in MX2 class until they actually came to Lomo. And then something happened there. I don't know if his sand skills was not as good, but definitely always look at a rider that was very talented, incredible rider. I think with the way that he handled the bike. So it's definitely not his skill that have put him back from not winning a world championship. But there's so many things why you become from being a good rider to like a championship contender in the world championship. There's so many things that have to click together, and we see that in Europe, but obviously we see it in the US as well. When you get a new opportunity, you take it and you perform even better than you maybe did in Europe, and vice versa. When you are the world champion of Europe, 4 times world champion, and then you come over and you expect to perform, and you want to win. Maybe you're not performing as good as you might expect it yourself. So it's a very, very tricky and difficult situation that, I'm glad that those two riders went over, and they're, I would say very successful, and hopefully they will get something out of it. Where, with Jorge Prado, it's a different scenario. He was expected maybe to come over and be. I would never have thought that he would come over and be dominated, but I probably think and thought that he was going to come over and do a little bit more of an impact that he have done so far.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of topic to touch on, mate. Obviously, it's been spoken a lot about. The whole situation just hasn't gone to plan whatsoever. And then you had at Budds Creek getting 43rd in qualifying, but making the motos due to the top 10 seeding rule. A lot of talk about, people saying he's not giving it his all and he's just out there trying to prove a point, which is quite strange because he still gets those starts, doesn't he, mate? So he's still putting a little statement in there despite the riding, not really being at what he's capable of in any way. So, there's obviously intent attached to whatever he's doing there. And it looks like that Kawasaki spell is going to come to an end pretty soon after SMX. And the relationship just seems broken, which must be so tough for the team and the rider to show up knowing there's that sort of animosity and tension in everything you do, and it's just sort of going through the motions, mate. But so the saga looks like it's going to come to a close, and you look at it, he's still got 6 overall in the point standings, which obviously is due to some riders getting injured and whatnot. But yeah, the fans in America definitely weren't really resonating with him the way he sort of handled it. Lots of various comments, and the way he sort of just ended up wanting to find a way out. So would love your take on it, mate. It definitely hasn't gone to plan. He hasn't sort of won too many supporters, and I'm guessing he'll just be glad to get back on an Austrian bike sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, I need almost to take a deep breath because there's so many things that I can see could maybe have done in a different way, but it's always easier to look back and think, maybe you shouldn't have said that and done this and whatever. So I will not comment too much on that. I think it's from my own perspective, and this is only my opinion about it. I think it's really sad to see such a great rider coming over and, choosing a different team, of his own choice, his clothing of his own choice. Everything just seemed like perfectly dialed in. The way that I know Prado is, is a very calm and collected and very honest with himself. And, I don't believe that you can become any kind of champion if you're not honest with yourself and you have that self-esteem and you have that belief in yourself. And you are, you only get those things if you're telling the truth all the time. So it's really, really sad for me to see such a great champion coming over and getting what he's getting, from the fans, from the team. I don't know in and out of the whole situation, so I will not comment too much on that. But I'm just I'm just putting my own perspective to the situation, and I think it's really sad to see that you're starting almost disrespecting each other in some way, that the fans also get involved, and the fans doesn't know anything about the inside information about the team or whatever is going on. But I think that those messages and whatever that's been said, even if Prado also came out with a kind of a take on what he actually meant behind those words, which is then from the American people maybe been taking a little bit different. So I think there's a lot of perspective. There's a lot of different things to say about it. But what I will say about it is that it's sad to see such a great champion, and not I cannot believe that he doesn't go out and do his best. It's just when you are a champion, it's just not in you. You when you sit on the bike, it's about you and the motorcycle and the track, and the only thing that you need to perform or think about is getting the fastest from A to B. This is our goal, And people always ask me, how do you deal with the fans and how do you deal with this? And it's not easy to get to that point where you actually don't give a shit, but you're actually just thinking about yourself, the motorcycle and the track, how you can get from one point to another point the fastest and the best and convenience and most, fastest way. So I know that mindset, what helped me through my career, for example, was really getting into that mindset where it was just about me. I didn't, care too much about where I raced, what I raced on, or who I raced with, but actually it was just me performing, because I was the guy that did all the hard work. And I'm sure Prado is the same. I think there is, when you come to the top of the pyramid, there is not a lot of different ways to think when you are in a push situation or you're in a pressure situation. There is a very narrative of just thinking ahead, thinking about yourself, thinking about the motorcycle. What did the motorcycle do? Where can we change? And that's the perspective. And it's just really sad to see that they had almost, a year to find out the best kind of solution for him. And there's been some complaints about the engines and everything, what I see. But, then he go out and pull some hold shots. And then you think, yeah, but then it cannot be the engine because it must be strong enough. So there must be something else. And we can keep thinking, and both me and you will never, then know the truth until you actually sit down with Prado on his own and thinking, what is actually going on here? What is your perspective on it? But it's a shame, because I think he's such a great rider. I mean, I watched his last race in Spain when he won his 4th World Championship, and just seeing him dancing around on his foot pegs and just using his cleverness to ride the bike, and the way he took the lines, and it's like ballet. It's like the finest. Or even at a Motocross Nation on Saturday. Sunday was probably not as good, but Saturday he was just amazing. The way he bounced over the bumps and the way he was riding, just completely effortless. And that's how I remember him and want to remember him. What I've seen this year with the racing that I've seen in the US is not Prado. For some reason, it's not him. And if that's something to do with the bike, the team, the atmosphere, whatever it could be, I have no idea. But I do know one thing, that Decali and Decali Racing and KTM, was probably the one for him, the same what it was with Caroli. Like Caroli stayed, all his 9 titles, since 2004, I believe. Till he finished, he was with Decali, and it becomes like a family, and a lot of trust, a lot of respect, and that develops over the years. And you can only create that respect and honestly with being honest. And I spoke with Decali, the son that runs the team last year, and he said, what? I am so proud of Prado, the way he won the World Championship, because he was quite a few points behind it. And, for whatever reason with the bike, and then also Geiser lost his foot peg, or, bent his foot peg in one race. So he had to make a DNF, and then he was a little bit back. But then he said there was no way that any point that season, even if he was 50 points, behind at some stage, that he said to me that he's not going to win that World Championship. He said, I'm going to win that World Championship, and I'm going to take it race by race. And he did, into the last race. So when you have that mentality, it just seems completely out of my mind, like how you can lose, that much confidence, in terms of setting up the bike and the mentality, what it takes to be on his level. So there's something deeper than just the bike. There's maybe an atmosphere. There's something, because at the end of the day, what I've always said, you can be the greatest guy in the world. You can, and you can be the strongest, but you also just a human being. We all have weaknesses in some way. We are not perfect, because that's not the way that we are created. We try to be perfect, and we try to better ourselves every day. But I have also been in teams where maybe it was not the team's fault, but maybe I didn't feel as comfortable as in other teams, and that's not something problem with the team. It's just the way that my personality is, clashes together with the personality I have to work with. It have to be very, Yeah, I don't know. I know the word, but I don't know how to pronounce it. They have to be very synchronized, and you have to almost understand each other like, a marriage. You have to kind of like already feeling what's going to happen. And when you say something, the other person have already thought about this. And then I also tried it the opposite, when things are not working. So I think for me, I think it's, yeah, I don't know the next step. The next step is maybe that he's going to go back to KTM or Gas or whatever. And it could maybe just be something with the frame. He's already, so many years rode with a steel frame. And, I remember going from Honda to Yamaha, it was a completely different feeling from riding a stiff, rigid aluminium frame. And then going back to Yamaha with Stefan Everts in 2005 with a steel frame, it was also not the problem of the bike, but it was actually the problem me getting used to a different feeling of a frame that was completely stiff, and then you get back to a bike that is where the frame is like all flexible in a different way. And obviously Stefan really liked that, but you can also say when he got the first 2006 aluminium produced Yamaha frame, yeah, he only lost one race, and that was to Joshua Coppens in somewhere in the UK, Isle of Wight, I think. Otherwise, he won every single moto. So he went from being great to like a legend, like just not producing less points than 22. So I guess that he proved also that the aluminium frame was really good. But it seems something with the frame. Maybe Prado doesn't like the frame is too stiff, and that could be the setup is suspension as well, like the way that he then wants to run a softer suspension, maybe because the frame is too hard or too rigid. Yeah, I have no idea. We can only predict this, but it's definitely sad for me to see, because you see some of the comments on the US and the social media. Yeah, the Americans you can see coming over to the Americans race against Tarmac or Tomac and the best riders in Jet Lawrence and I think for sure they're great riders, but I also remember a great rider from the US called Ryan Villapoto coming over to the MXGP and not really showing the greatness that we saw on TV. So again, it's so, I think it's so difficult now to actually compare the two series. If you took the best American coming over to Europe, I'm sure it's going to be difficult. Maybe it can go good or it could go really bad. And the same with the European being world champion coming over to the AMA. We have seen the opposite, So I think, from being a motocross fan and a previous rider, I would be very difficult to be criticizing anyone that has been 4 times world champion, because you don't become 4 times world champion. I know that for sure, without being really strong and being very dedicated and definitely not making any excuses for yourself. So whatever's that going wrong there, I have no idea, but something is definitely not right. We can all see that anyway. It's not the way that we watch Prado race here in Europe.
Yeah, it's well said, mate. It's a great analysis of the situation and very thorough stuff. And yeah, it's like you said, that winner's mindset and that sort of never defeated approach that he showed definitely hasn't really been on show too often in America. And it's crazy, less than a year ago at the last Motocross of Nations, how you caught up with Villapoto and Ricky Carmichael, guys have raced and all that. And no one would have thought it would have panned out like that, would they, mate? So I guess,
No.
10 months, 12 months is a long time, and it's a lot can change, even though the trajectory of Prado was he would just keep, going from strength to strength like he's done throughout his career. And, it's kind of a bit of a sad thing for him and Spain and the whole Motocross of Nations event in America, where he's just moved to racing and he won't be there because of obviously all the drama going on in the background with potentially changing teams and all that. So that's a little bit of a blow for him and just the whole motocross community as well, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, and you could definitely say that, and that is a great shame, But I think again, I think being who he is, he have enough confidence in himself to actually, go with maybe a different manufacturer. If it's going to be KTM, he definitely knows how to set the bike up. But also, you have to remember that the European factory bikes compared to the US production factory bike are definitely not the same. So there can also be a lot of difference there. So, first of all, when Ryan Villopoto came over and rode a full factory bike, which then you think a full factory Japanese bike must be better than what he rides in the US. But I had the feeling that he didn't really like that bike too much, and the whole setup with being really low in the rear and really hard front fork, like almost supercross setting in the front fork, just on the European tracks where you don't hit the speed on the straight the same way that you do in the US. The bike is having a completely different balance, and you need to turn with the front wheel here in Europe, where in the US you turn a lot with the rear wheel because you're like wide open on the power going outside. You always have a lot of power in your hand because of the fuel regulation and the way you can pump the bike up, so you can really steer a lot more with the rear wheel. Where here in Europe, you really have to tuck in the front and you use the front brake to kind of, dragging around the small turns to keep the front wheel tucked in the small rod, But in the US, you have a lot bigger rods. And we also start, I must say, like, since I stopped and see the tracks, the way that they're developing here in the recent years, that they do a lot of better work with the track, a lot more like American style. Which probably for me would have suited me a lot more because I love rods and I love to be a little bit aggressive. I had to adapt my riding style into be a lot more smooth and high gears, a little bit same like Stefan, And I think with Jorge also it suited him really well because he could really ride with a lot of power in his hand, with the factory gas he had here in Europe. He knew exactly what to expect from the frame because he's been riding, even if they make changes of the frame and the bike, but he's been riding more or less the same, angles for, since he started with 125, and the team, did a great job setting and helping him to set up the best way possible. So, yeah, I just really wish him the best, and I really wish that he will come back to his normal self, because all that work, all that commitment and everything that you have to go through as a racer, nobody deserved to be be attacked like that from the media and especially from the fans, because you have to remember lots of those people that are attacking Prado have never sat on a motorcycle in their life. So you're thinking like, do you know that, like you just mentioned, he actually finished 6th overall in the AM, motocross championship. And I think, yeah, okay, I probably expect a little bit more, but it's not too bad compared to, how bad the results was a little bit towards the end. So, I don't know. Again, it's always about finding the right, balance between expectation and being realistic, and I say that as well to, when a lot of people ask me about the Villopoto situation, I said, the problem is with Villopoto coming over here is that, everyone expects him to be a world champion the first year. And nobody wanted to kind of said, you know what, I think you are a great legend. I think you are a great champion. But over here in Europe, we do it this way. We set up the front fork in this way. We set up, but because he's such a great champion, nobody had probably the guts to actually, giving him the right advice, because people think he must be fucking nowhere to go with this because he's, we've seen him. He's an incredible rider, but actually maybe he should have had maybe a guy like me. Maybe that would have been more appropriate to have a guy like me to actually guide him and said, you know what, we need to change a little bit the riding style, because here we use the front brake a lot more. We need to tuck into the small corners going the shortest way, because on the outside it's going to be slippery and we cannot go wide open steering around with the rear wheel on dirt with small rocks. It's going to be unpredictable. So here we need to look for the safety and using and be very precise on our lines. We cannot miss like 20 centimeters, where in the US you just take another rod and then you go wide open. We even seen, Jet Lawrence going around Hunter Lawrence being wide open on the outside, like fourth or fifth gear, and it's just so many opportunities. And we don't have quite the same opportunities here in Europe. We need to take them with preciseness and patience, and it's just a different riding style. And, that's what I saw with Ryan Villopoto coming over here. It should have been like, let's get a top 5 the first year. Let's get through the season learning and, finding out how we ride those European tracks. And let's attack next year. Let's give it a year. And I think, once you see that with Prado as well, the way that he was also speaking a little bit, I think that he literally think that he could come over and not winning the Supercross because he felt good and he looked good, but to feel good and look good and to race good and to be in a beast mode, like when you see, like Tomac, the way that he sometimes, last year, but also, in the past, he rides Supercross where he just go into like a, what they call the beast mode or whatever that is, but just attack everything like wide open for 20 laps. I mean, to do that, I think we all can maybe go and do like some Supercross and practice, but to race that for 20 laps on that level is just gnarly. It's just incredible. And I think no matter who you are, you cannot expect someone to come over and just be gnarly on the first year, And I think if they put the expectation maybe a little bit down and just got through and, like he did half of the Supercross the year before when he rode on gas, I think he did it very well. Some people maybe expected more, but I think honestly that was his place until he gets more feeling with, and he got pretty good starts and he could stay up front a little while and then he would drop back because he's not used to that aggressiveness that they have, in the US riding the Supercross. But he took that good thing, with being more aggressive, being more intensive on the first 5-6 lap. He took that to MXGP. And, you could definitely see that was what he was missing from the previous years, that he was more like getting into the group. But now, last season when he won it, he had a lot more punts on the first 5, 6, 7 laps, getting good start, of course, like he always did. I think that we worked out that he made probably over 70 grand in whole shots money over the years. I think it was something like ridiculous. Was it 96% of some of the whole shot that he took since he started winning races in the MXGP class and the MX2. It was unbelievable. But then he really had that punch that you can see that he got from the US. When the gate drops, it's he would put the hammer down for 7, 8, 10 laps, and then kind of just went back to like smooth and being really, really good on the bike. So why he's not doing that now is obviously because he doesn't feel comfortable, and it seems like the information that he's giving and the team are able to put return to him maybe doesn't clash in some way, and that is just like that sometimes with teams, and that's down to personalities and connection, I would say, even.
Yeah, there's lots to be said for sort of continuity and just having that, that framework around you that you can know and trust, and how to get the best out of each other. And you look at the perfect examples there, Jet and Hunter Lawrence with that HRC framework. They've been with their mechanics for ages, same team managers, they got their own training program. Their dad, Dazzy Lawrence, is always overseeing everything, keeping them focused on the right track. And Jet and Hunter have had amazing seasons, just absolutely flawless. And Jet, another title to his name, so special to him after coming off that injury, the ACL injury earlier in the year. And he's always just impressing with his technique, his speed, the skill, the nuances, the way he sort of positions himself on the bike and, just navigates the track and the races as well, the management, the racecraft, line selection, like you were talking about, mate. So, and that's all sort of underpinned by having that framework around him where if there's a challenge, they know how to attack it. They're not sort of throwing anything at it. They know how to do things. And even they change bikes on press day to test each other's settings and see what they like and what they don't like. So they've got all those fine margins sorted out, which you need to win at the highest level, mate. So would love your take on the Lawrence brothers. And I guess they're going to be pretty hard to beat in SMX too, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it is, just those two guys have just, elevated the sport, in such a such an incredible way that I think, when you stand there as a coach and you see what they're capable of and the riding style they're using to produce that speed and safetyness and everything what that comes with going that fast. I think it's just a great aspect of really telling riders and also myself as a coach, teaching people to go, fast, but be aware of what you're doing, when you're doing it, and how you're doing it, and that's exactly what they're capable of. They are, the racecraft that I always said it, to my riders, if I have to use them as example, is it almost like you play like the film. You see half of the lap, or you see 4 or 5 corners. We will see that now, and then we would rewind, and then it's almost like you put him one more time, and he already knows what he's actually gonna do before he's doing it. He's have such a great, opportunity, or such a great feeling for knowing exactly what the riders are going to do, the opportunities that he have with looking at the vision of the whole track. So he's one of those riders that, obviously a lot of riders are racing, but they are also analyzing. But his analyzation of the track is like he sees all the lines, and it's like his eyes are like out here. So once he want to change, he's already making that up from analyzing the first, the lap before, and he's already seeing that little film being played and kind of start planning it out, putting him in the right position, and then he just goes like a shark attack of just making that one extra effort, and then he makes the pass, and I think that's such a amazing thing. Like I was in Ernée, and I was standing on top of the hill, and when you watch the track on video, or on the net or whatever, it looks quite bearable to be able to pass. But when you're actually racing the track yourself, I mean, I rode more than 6 Grand Prix there, and then watching there, standing in the middle of the track, you just like, there's not a lot of opportunities for passing, and the way that he planned out the way to pass coming down the hills, and there was 2 people in front, one will go high, one will go inside, and he would just go like in the middle, already knowing what that guy, if he's going to square it off, or that guy will go inside. He kind of already planned it out in his head. And I was just like, honestly, like, I was the first time that I saw him live racing, and the first 10 minutes I was a bit like, yeah, okay, he can ride a motorcycle, but after the 10 minutes of warming up the qualifying race on Saturday, he got down to work, and then he started picking one by one, but not with a like really aggressive style, but like a planned out. Everything what he did was like, yeah. I don't even know what I can compare with. I always say, like, if you were, I try to explain in most understandable way, like when I'm in the field training the riders, and I said, you to make passes, you have to be smart, but you also have to be patient. You have to be very good at calculating, and you need to be very good at looking at the body language on how the people are moving around with their body to be able to change if they go right or left. And, if they go right, you need to go left, and the opposite way, And I said, it's almost like being a lion in the desert and you haven't been eating for 2 months. You have to think about your companions competitors in this way. And you're lying there and you are so hungry, if you don't get the food now, there will maybe be another 2 months, and then you basically not survive. So that kind of survival mode, how will you attack this? How will you attack this kind of rider, And you will wait, and you will be patient, and you will go a little bit closer, very, very carefully, and you will analyze your target, and you will see that target. And when you're close enough and now it's time to attack, you have to give it all, because there's only one chance, and that's the way that, I learned to be in the end as well, being, more calculated and more smart with my passing, and being a lot more patient. And that's what I see also with Jet, that he's not, because he's a lot patient and he waits, but he's just very calculated of what he does. He plans that, like, when I see him ride, I can see it already when he starts setting up a pass. He already did like 4 corners ago. He started putting himself on outside and inside and then outside, and that brings him to the outside, and now he made the pass. But he already started planning 4 corners ahead, the way that he passed. I don't remember where there was those bolts turn and he passed Tomac, when he went outside and then Tomac went inside, and then Tomac was going inside there, and then he went outside again, and then he came out with, like, instead of being one bike in front, he was like 4 bikes in front, and then the race was done. It just 2 corners. It went from being behind him or just defending him to actually the race is done, because now we have 4 or 5 bike lengths, and he's never going to catch them in 4 corners, So no, it's definitely impressive, and I know they had some heat as well, this year. I don't know the ins and out of all that, but definitely had some heat from the press and from the fans, and and that's what I mean. Like the same with Prado, you just need to stay focused and keep your eyes on your own line. And, whatever has been said and done, if there's been said and done something, you cannot really change it. You cannot really do anything about it. You can only focus on yourself and try to make it a better life for yourself. And you less that you listen to other people, you less it's going to affect you. And I think that did a perfect example of all that heat and everything around them, and, social media. And they kind of just closed that down and just went winning, and, then it all kind of disappears. And I think that's the same with Prado. It's like it's gonna disappear. He's gonna get like a moto win, whatever race they're gonna be in, and it's all gonna be gone. And you have to kind of believe in that moment, and you think, if you're honest with yourself all the time and not trying to interfere too much with the fans, because fans have their own opinion about you for whatever reason, and you more that you start fighting against those things and trying to, how can I say, justify yourself, you worse is gonna get. I remember watching some of Robson's comments sometimes, when people didn't like him in the beginning or something. He start commenting on the things, and I'm thinking, like, why do you even try? Because you don't have to defend anything. You're a fucking unbelievable rider. You can just defend your words by just turning the throttle and win the next race, and everything will be gone. And that's one of the things that I definitely learned in life as well. Like, if you're good at something, if you're doing something good, there's a lot of people that maybe don't like you for that same reason. And instead of trying to do something about it and changing yourself because now you think that you have to please everyone, you might just continue being yourself, because you're gonna get haters, and you're gonna get people that love you, and it the people that hate you for the wrong reason, and the people love you is because they embrace and see the good things and the hard work that you put in. And I think that's really important as a racer, because we will see through the years we have legend coming through, and I'm sure that there's more from Prado and more from Jet Lawrence. People don't like him or whatever because he beats all the Americans or whatever it is. But you can only be who you are, and just do it for yourself, and then people will like you and people will dislike you, and that's just life in general. No.
Yeah, well said, mate. That's awesome stuff. And obviously, last topic before we wrap up, mate. Obviously, the time's flying on these. It'd be great to sort of get your take on Deegan. He sort of has that pretty brash approach, always looking to gain the upper hand on his competitors through his riding and his actions, mate. His interviews are always box office. You got to love that sort of style he has, where he just wants to crush the competition, doesn't he, mate? He doesn't hold back, letting his feelings known to anyone. He's got that sort of tension simmering with Jet Lawrence already. You saw a couple of antics at Budds Creek, but it's going to be pretty interesting to see how that goes, mate. They're certainly elevating the spice, but the Deegans do it in a pretty coordinated manner too. They know what they're doing. Hayden may seem that he's off the cuff, but there's a lot of sort of intention behind it too. But one thing you can't deny with him is the riding, the heart, the fitness, like the work has all been put in, and he continues to improve. He's got a lot of technical refinements now. He's not just wide open, sort of, on the edge of the seat the whole time. He's a very complete rider these days. So that rivalry will be epic. But focusing on this weekend, he's going to have a fair battle on his hands, getting over the line with Shimoda, who's proven all this year, what a great athlete he is. And he's got the fitness, he's got the technical base as well. And, he's coming into his own too. He's probably really the only man that can beat Deegan, it would look like on the surface at this point. And he's really good at SMX in the last two editions too. So that's a nice little battle this weekend before, I guess, the main course, Jet Lawrence Deegan, for pro motocross next year is going to be epic.
Yeah. No, it's really funny because my son is is obviously also into motocross and been riding a little bit himself, but in terms of condition, we are in. He plays also a lot of football, and I think that's great. I don't care what my kids are doing as long as they're happy and they love to do what they're doing. Then I'm happy. And he always said to me, he was watching always the Deegan, the Danger Deegan, on the YouTube and everything. And he said, "Dad, do you think this guy is going to be really good?" And I said, "You know what? It can go two ways. It can go like he already got it all. He makes a lot of money. He will probably, it was just when he signed with Star, and he said, 'Do you think he's going to be like the next Cooper Webb or someone like that?' And I said, 'You know what? I don't think so.' And why I didn't think so, because he already had it all. Always had the best opportunities, the best, but he definitely proved me wrong. So all the time now when my son, he said, 'Look at Deegan, he won another time.' And what did I say? And I could just not say anything, because you are right. I didn't expect that to happen. I know that he was a good rider and everything, but I thought maybe with being handed with a lot of stuff from the background, I thought maybe he didn't have the fire and desire to actually win all the time, because it is a lot of pressure. You got to find your own reasons why you want to do it, and you got to almost be a little bit mental to want it that much, that as you want to breed, kind of way. And but he definitely proved me wrong, and I think he's a great rider. Do I like his way of being? I don't know. I'm a little bit more of an old style. Like keep quiet and turn the throttle and show the results, and and then that way you have already spoken. But those days, yeah, it's probably just because I'm a little bit older, and I see the racing in a different way, and the approach of more of a like myself, or Stefan, or even Ricky Carmichael, being humbled, and if someone beats you, is like, yeah, fair play. Fucking if he beats me, he can do this because I work fucking hard to achieve what I achieve, and to do what I do. So if someone beats me, like Carmichael always said, when Stewart was on the game of being the fastest man on the planet, and he's just said, the only comment he has, yeah, but who won the championship? And then that's pretty much said and done. You don't need more of a media stunt to say anything. But I must say, I kind of, my own preference of being a person, I'll probably go with a little bit more of a humble guy, which I probably see more in Jet Lawrence. The way that he also approaches his answers at the press conference, when he said, when I love to ride, with Tomac and my brother, even, we race hard, but we have a lot of respect for each other. And I think if you have to think about being a good ambassador for motocross as well, we already know that it's quite dangerous. And I would probably, in my preference of style, I would probably prefer a lot more to a Jet Lawrence kind of approach to the sport than Hayden Deegan, even if I think that it's great. It creates a lot of attention. But because I think I'm a lot more humble myself, I probably go a little bit more with Jet Lawrence, thinking that I'm that fucking good. I don't even have to tell anyone that I'm good, because I respect every rider. Maybe I don't do deeply inside, but anyway, this is what I'm going to say. But I honestly believe that that Jet Lawrence is that good and so confident in his own capabilities that he actually wants everyone else also to be successful. But if they beat them or beat him, it's because they're really good at what they do. Because Jet Lawrence is amazing. I love to see him ride. The way that he approaches the bumps, and the way that he uses the bike and the power and the gears, and it's just everything is just like ballet dancing. It's so fine-tuned, everything what he does, where I see probably Deegan a little bit more like Tomac, with aggression and using the power, and I think he's gonna have to change his riding style quite a bit in terms of revving the bike and using more of a higher gear, because the bike gonna have a lot of power, it's gonna have a lot of torque. And when you see Jet Lawrence using the power he's always using in a torquey curve of the power, it never really revs the bike out to the limit, because as soon as the power start digging off, you start putting a lot of more weight to the front, and you want to keep that bike in high gear and torquey momentum all the time, so you keep tracking and keeping the front a lot more light. So I definitely think that's going to be very interesting. It's going to be like almost like what we have seen before with Jet and Tomac. It's like two different opposite riding styles, but both are very effective, and both can turn the throttle and turn the heat when it really needs to be turned on. So, but in that completely two different ways. Like I would say, Jet Lawrence is he never have to go into the beast mode. He just perfectionize everything. Everything what he does is just perfectionizing, where you see Tomac can go from that really fast, and then he can go into that beast mode where he's just fucking destroying everything, and moving the dirt, and, really have that power to be able to do that. It's also fantastic to look at, where Jet is a little bit more like, some people think that Stefan Evers was boring to watch, where, racing him and seeing him, it was more like fascinating, because the way that he approached the bumps, because one thing is to look, but when you sit on a motorcycle to actually be able to do it's something that requires so much patience and so much preciseness, and so much of perfection, the way you brake and the way that you touch the berm and the way that you use the throttle and not digging the bike into the dirt is just amazing. But obviously people that have not sit on a motorcycle before don't see all those things or been on a high level in the sport. But I love to see, both riders like Deegan and Jet Lawrence, and even Shimoda. I think he's like a really, really interesting rider to watch at, and there's so many good riders today to say, but I don't have like a rider that I'm, really. Jet is probably the preferredness, not only because he's winning, but because I don't know. I never met him. I think, but I just like his personality, because he's calm, is collected, he's doing exactly what he says he's going to do, and he's not saying more than what he's capable of doing. And I think that's probably the way that I like, to say, if I knew that I could be top 3, I will always see top 5, because I think it's always better to impress than coming out and, oh, you said you're going to be top 3 and now you're only top 5. Yeah, it's better to go the other way around, and I think that's a little bit of a more of a humble way to approach your career and your results, is maybe going a little bit lower, even if you know that I'm capable of winning. As soon as I get it over my lips, the people's expectation is already quite a lot higher, and it's better to surprise than, how can you say, people being disappointed, but they say like, yeah, you said, yeah, I said I'm going to be top 5, but now I'm top 3. So it's like, yes, it's a positive kind of mindset, no?
Oh, it's great insight, mate. It's great to hear the way you look at it and analyze the sport. It's awesome, mate. We've sort of hit over an hour already, mate. It's crazy how quick it goes. But just give everyone, a chance. Where do they follow you? Where can they sign up to your schools there in Spain? And what's on the cards for the next couple of weeks, mate? We'll have to do another one of these, because there's plenty to
Yeah.
tuck into in the sport. It's all happening. So just give us any final thoughts there.
Yeah, so basically, one of the things that I really like to do is actually, taking some of my own experience through the years, and I know that when I became a lot better and I started to understand, the way to prepare for the motocross season, and the MXGP class was actually the preparation that I do in the winter. So once I started getting more experience, and I knew that people, instead of going home and resting on the couch for 3 months, I find out that the best in the world, they do, like, we can call it the ladder, improvement. They will be here, and then the end of the season they will dip down a little bit, and then they will start building, and then they will end on a higher for the new season, and they will keep working like that all the time. Where I made the mistake, which I didn't know anything about. I kind of peaked in the end of the season with my riding, and then I will go, off season, I will go down here, and then I will start training again, and then I will peak at the same level that I did the previous season. So now I have made no progression. I just reached the same point, and that's why I started, training the winter series, like the winter training in Red Sand, which is here in Spain, where I do first like a cycling camp in November. Cycling and fitness camp, I call it, where I take riders down, and we working on the fitness, where we learn a little bit about what is recuperation training, what kind of heart rate do we need to ride in, what does hard training means, and what does consistency of training means, and what will that give to my kind of training level. Because motocross and being a top athlete is not something that you just do for a couple of weeks and then you think, yes, now I'm in good shape. Is continually working in programs and working in progression. And you can always, even for me today, I was out cycling also. Now when I'm home, I can do some cycling like more or less every day in the morning, because it's still quite hot here in Spain. And I love it, because I can feel like small improvement all the time. Maybe I'm not improving like the new Tata Picacho, but I'm getting a little bit better every day. And this is the progression that motivates me, and having a lot more, you can say, motivation to go training, which is of course fueled by it's fueled by determination as well, and trying to bring that consistency, and that's what I do in the winter. So November, it's more like a fitness camp. I do in the middle of November. And then December, we start with bike riding, because I always think if you want to come to a coach and you want to learn about things, you earlier that you start doing the season, then we are working a lot on the technique. We are working a lot on starts, doing all the small things that would eventually develop you as a better rider. So I start the first boot camp, what I call it. And this boot camp have to be understood in this way, that we do, some cycling for recuperation. We do motocross, of course, which is the main sport, but trying to do a lot of technical training, a lot of difficult or different drills with trying to improve your way of riding, positioning, the way that we handle the throttle, thinking about gears, and a lot of things that I experienced over the years. And of course, like during the day off, we do some fitness training, we do a longer cycle, and just giving them a little bit of an insight also from what it's going to take to be, progressing in your sport. It doesn't take a month effort. It doesn't take 2 months. It's the consistency of what you do every year, as we see with the MXGP rider or EMX riders. It's, one guy, he was here and then suddenly he's here. You see Gifting is a good example, working a little bit. I think like 5 or 7 years ago, he was in MX2 class and still, was pretty good. But then you come up to MXGP and then, you're nobody. And then you start working your way up and look at where he is now, just being consistent all years and training hard and doing things, getting more confidence. And confidence is fueled by preparation. Think that, when people ask me like, how did you get confidence to sit behind the start and think you can win? Well, because I did a lot of work. I know there was nobody on the line that would be fitter than me. Maybe there's people that's better than me, but not fitter than me. So that brings my confidence to say, when the gate drops, I am ready to fight. And I can fight for 40 minutes plus 2 laps or whatever is required at that point. And that gives confidence, and then when you start getting top 5, top 3, and you're thinking, fuck top 3, top 5, now I want to win. And that's why I start seeing this number 72, because he was the guy that was winning all the time. And I just really wanted to beat him, but I forgot all the other 39 riders, where you come up to the GP class and it's like you have Smets, you have Pichon, you have all those great riders, which I have great respect for. and then suddenly you sit behind the gate and thinking just about one rider. And that was a great privilege for me to have, and that only came from hard work and dedication and believing in myself, and having the confidence to keep going, and never quit, never give up, just always thinking that you can be a little bit better. And I live by that same philosophy today. I always think that I can be a little bit better, even if that's as a person or that's an athlete. It doesn't really matter, but I always think that I'm here to challenge myself and try to develop and to be a little bit better all the time. Also as coaching, I used to say to people, yeah, I did it that way and I did it this way, but now like people just like, yeah, but it's 20 years ago that you won a Grand Prix, and it's like, we were not even born. So so you also get familiar with that. So now you just start using other people as example, like Jet Lawrence. Obviously he's the top of the sport now, and said let's try to do it like him. But I know that my style was more or less the way that he rides today was what I ended up with, finding out that this is the way to ride motorcycles. And that's where I start getting consistency of the podium, because I was not racing all the time, the whole moto. I was actually being smart and using and consuming my own energy, and how I can ride faster for 40 minutes without using all my energy the first 10 minutes. So you have to be smart, and that comes from experience. So that's what I try to do over the winter. So I have a combination of boot camp starting from the 10th of December, and then I have like a New Year camp where all people can sign on, and then I have boot camps in beginning of January, end of January again, and then obviously I do another what we call a winter camp, winter holiday, which is week 7. And then I have the Blue Crew camps for Yamaha Scandinavia, and so everyone that rides Yamaha. So it's going to be a busy schedule from, let's say, beginning of November. We have the masterclass in France, which I'm doing together with Pauline Gauthier and Nancy Van der Ven, where we're going to pick out those 3 riders that have qualified themselves for the masterclass, and trying to pick and choose the best one that can give the, Yamaha the best results for the future, and have a awesome experience with getting support.
Oh, it's going to be awesome, mate. You definitely got a full plate for the, last couple of months of the year. It's crazy how quick it's gone, mate. But yeah, massive thanks again for joining us on this one. It's been another awesome podcast, and I'm sure the fans will love it. We'll definitely dial up another one. And big shout out to the sponsors as well in Fly Racing, Firepower, Dirt Store, and Fuchs Huckling for all their incredible support, as without them, none of this would be possible. All right, thanks again, Brian. Been another ripper chat. All the best, and we'll catch up soon.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, mate.
No worries,
Cheers.
mate. Have a good one.